Ferrari has always been the ultimate luxury car brand. A car you couldn't just walk in and buy, you had to wait for it. And even then, you were handed a list of rules as if you were joining an exclusive club. But those rules were exactly what made the brand iconic. It was the car almost no one could get. And that's precisely why people wanted it so badly. But that image is starting to shift. One man stepped in with a plan to reinvent Ferrari. And under his leadership, Ferrari is selling more cars than ever before. But not everyone thinks that's good news, because that growth is exposing cracks in everything. That made Ferrari feel untouchable for decades. Ferrari's entire business model was built on a paradox. In any normal industry, if you sell products for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you'd want to sell as many as possible. And on paper, Ferrari could have done exactly that. Their cheapest models sit around $230,000 to $280,000, while the exclusive, performance-focused cars easily pass $1 million. Yet despite those price tags, Ferrari has never struggled to sell a single one. Customers lined up on waiting lists, deals were made years in advance, and no matter how high the demand got, Ferrari refused to match it, because Ferrari wasn't in the business of meeting demand. They were in the business of controlling it. For decades, Ferrari perfected something luxury brands rarely admit out loud: artificial scarcity, the deliberate restriction of supply to turn a product into a social and financial symbol. And Ferrari wasn't alone. Hermes releases just enough Birkin bags to keep global demand permanently outrunning supply. Rolex quietly limits deliveries to boutiques, so even wealthy buyers face years-long wait lists. Lamborghini kept the initial Aventador production tightly capped, knowing exclusivity does more for the brand than mass availability ever could. Ferrari simply executed this strategy better and harsher than anyone else. To understand how deep the strategy ran, you have to look at how Ferrari operationalized scarcity behind the scenes. Production planning wasn't just about manufacturing capacity, it was a brand decision. Factories could build more cars, but Ferrari intentionally dialed the output down year after year. Allocations to each region were handled like precious assets, not based on market size, but based on where exclusivity would be protected most fiercely. If a country started showing signs of oversaturation, Ferrari simply choked the supply. Historical models reveal the playbook clearly. The F40, one of the most legendary Ferraris ever made, was originally planned for around 400 units. But demand exploded. Still, Ferrari kept the production absurdly low compared to demand, knowing the hunger itself was part of the myth. The F50 repeated the formula: a once-in-a-generation car, sold only to pre-selected buyers, and kept deliberately rare to elevate its aura. This scarcity wasn't an accident. It wasn't a byproduct of technical constraints. It was the core product Ferrari was selling. Because the psychology behind artificial scarcity is brutally effective. When something is hard to get, it becomes a marker of status. A membership badge stamped onto the buyer's identity. It's no longer about the car's performance. It's about what the car says about you. Exclusivity becomes the value proposition. And there's another layer: status competition. When supply is limited, even wealthy buyers compete with each other. Owning a Ferrari isn't just a purchase. It's proof that you beat thousands of equally wealthy people to the front of the line. That competition amplifies desire, pushes resale prices up, and turns a depreciating asset into something that often appreciates the moment it leaves the factory. Ferrari mastered this dynamic so perfectly that they could protect the brand, inflate demand, and guarantee long-term value for owners. With a single philosophy: always sell one less car than the world wants. It worked flawlessly. Until someone decided the world should start getting more. If scarcity was the foundation of Ferrari's empire, gatekeeping was the fortress built on top of it. Ferrari didn't just limit how many cars they produced. They controlled who was allowed to buy one. And their rules weren't suggestions. They were non-negotiable conditions for entry into the club. Ferrari's vetting system became infamous. You couldn't simply walk into a dealership, flash cash, and drive out in a brand new Ferrari. The company dug into your ownership history, examined how you treated previous cars, and even checked whether you flipped high-demand models too quickly. One owner scratched his car on track and posted photos online. Ferrari reportedly moved him down the allocation list for years. Another crashed a limited edition and publicly mocked the repair process. Ferrari reportedly never offered him a new model again. Because to Ferrari, owning the car wasn't enough. You had to protect the myth. This is where the rules turned absurd. Owners were forbidden from selling too early, often for 12 to 24 months after delivery. Break the rule and you wouldn't get banned outright.
Ferrari would just move you further down the list.
But in the Ferrari world,
That's the same as exile.
a polite way of saying you'll never get a limited model again. Even celebrities weren't safe. Justin Bieber allegedly received a warning after repainting his 458 without approval and selling it too quickly. Kim Kardashian was reportedly blacklisted for similar behavior.
If global superstars couldn't escape Ferrari's rules, ordinary millionaires didn't stand a chance.
And the strictest rule of all?
Customization.
Ferrari offered a tailor-made program, but even that came with tight creative handcuffs. No wild colors, no extreme body kits, nothing that deviated from what Ferrari considered appropriate for the brand. Because the moment one owner makes a bizarre choice, every future buyer is affected. And Ferrari knew exactly why this mattered. The resale market. Collectors tracked originality obsessively. Auctions rewarded purity. A rare Ferrari in factory-correct condition
Could sell for hundreds of thousands more.
than the same car with eccentric modifications. If Ferrari allowed bad taste to spread, resale values would collapse, collectors would retreat, auctions would suffer, and the financial ecosystem Ferrari spent decades building would begin to crack. So the company tightened the rules even further. Even minor deviations, painted wheels, tinted lights,
Or aftermarket exhausts.
were enough to get a warning. Do it twice, and you could forget about ever getting an invitation to buy a limited model again. This wasn't just gatekeeping, it was brand preservation weaponized, a system designed to maintain mystique today and protect financial value tomorrow.
Ferrari made ownership feel like membership.
And membership required obedience. For decades, this strategy worked flawlessly. But the moment Ferrari decided to expand production,
This gatekeeping system, the very structure that gave the brand its power,
began to strain under the pressure because the more people you let into the club, the harder it becomes to keep the doors locked. In June 2021, Ferrari made a decision that shocked both fans and insiders. They appointed Benedetto Vigna as CEO, a man who didn't come from racing, engineering, or even the automotive world. He came from the microchip industry. To Ferrari purists, this was almost heresy, but the board knew exactly what they were doing.
Ferrari was facing a threat far more dangerous than any rival brand. Stagnation.
The luxury car market was changing fast. New buyers were younger, flashier, and more global. The average Ferrari customer was aging, and younger millionaires in China, India, and the Middle East weren't drawn to the same romantic idea of a two-door Italian supercar.
They wanted practicality. Something they could drive daily.
Take their families in and still flex on social media. At the same time, markets like China were exploding. Luxury car sales in major Chinese cities doubled within a decade,
And the Middle East became one of the fastest growing regions for ultra-premium brands.
Brands like Lamborghini and Bentley capitalized on this shift early. Ferrari, however, stayed loyal to tradition, but that loyalty was starting to cost them billions.
Vigna saw it clearly.
Ferrari's old strategy of one less car than the world wants could not work forever. Not if they wanted to compete in a luxury market, where SUVs and crossovers were becoming dominant. And that's where the real tension began. Because the global SUV wave wasn't a trend, it was a revolution. By the time Vigna arrived, the Lamborghini Urus accounted for a staggering 60 to 70% of Lamborghini's total sales.
The Porsche Cayenne didn't just sell well.
It was the financial lifeline that transformed Porsche from a niche sports car maker into one of the most profitable automotive companies on earth. Every luxury brand had realized the same thing. If you want volume and explosive growth,
You need an SUV.
Ferrari was the last holdout. Vigna believed that sticking to traditional two-door sports cars wasn't noble, it was outdated. And outdated brands die quietly. So Ferrari introduced the Purosangue. Technically, Ferrari denied it was an SUV, but anyone with eyes could see the truth. It was tall, large, powerful, and designed to capture the same high-income market.
That made the Urus a global phenomenon.
But the Purosangue didn't just represent a new model.
It represented a new philosophy.
Ferrari was no longer interested in being a brand, reserved only for the purest sports car enthusiasts. They were expanding their lineup with grand tours like the Amalfi GT and luxury-focused models like the 12 Cylindri. More models meant more customers meant more revenue, and more revenue meant a stronger short-term market performance. But inside Ferrari, the move triggered chaos. Engineers, designers, and longtime executives feared that an SUV would betray everything Ferrari stood for. Purists within the company worried that once Ferrari opened the door to mass-market luxury, they would never be able to close it again. Some argued it would dilute the racing DNA, others feared it would damage the brand's image faster than any competitor could.
Yet Vigna pushed forward.
Because in his eyes, Ferrari wasn't keeping up.
It was falling behind.
And if the world was shifting, Ferrari had to shift with it or risk becoming a relic of its own legacy. When Vigna talked about environmental conditions changing, he didn't just mean bureaucracy or slow product cycles. He meant something far bigger. The most controversial shift Ferrari had faced in its entire history:
electrification. In 2022, Ferrari revealed its aggressive targets.
By 2026, 60% of their lineup would be hybrid or fully electric.
By 2030, just 20% of Ferraris would keep the traditional combustion engine,
the heart, soul, and identity of the brand. And for many fans, that announcement felt like sacrilege, because an electric Ferrari isn't just different. It challenges everything that defines the Ferrari experience. A Ferrari is supposed to scream. That V12 wail, the mechanical violence of pistons, revs, and combustion, isn't just sound. It's emotion. It's heritage. An EV, no matter how powerful, is silent. And silence is the one thing Ferrari has never been known for. Then there's the weight problem. Ferrari's DNA comes from racing,
lightweight bodies, razor-sharp handling,
the feeling that the car is alive and twitching under your fingertips.
But EV batteries are heavy,
often hundreds of kilograms heavier than a traditional setup.
That weight dulls feedback, slows cornering, and makes even the fastest EVs feel disconnected. This is why many Ferrari enthusiasts worry that the brand is forcing a technology that simply doesn't fit its racing heritage. Other brands have experimented, with mixed results. The Porsche Taycan was a commercial hit, showing that a performance electric vehicle can work. But Taycan sales have since slowed, and Porsche is quietly reassessing how fast. They want to push full electrification. Rimac proved electric hypercars can be brutally fast. But they're niche, tiny volume halo cars,
not daily drivers tied to decades of emotional legacy. And Lamborghini? They intentionally delayed their EV program, publicly admitting that current battery technology can't deliver the emotion expected from the brand.
Ferrari took the opposite approach, full speed ahead.
But fans pushed back immediately. On Ferrari forums, one longtime owner wrote, "A silent Ferrari is not a Ferrari. It's a laptop on wheels with a horse badge." Others threatened to switch to McLaren or Koenigsegg,
two brands still loudly committed to high-revving combustion engines.
The backlash wasn't small. It wasn't niche. It was a real warning sign, because Ferrari had always been the one brand
where customers didn't hesitate.
You don't test drive a Ferrari. You order it because you know exactly what kind of experience you're buying. But with electrification, that experience became uncertain. And uncertainty is dangerous for a brand. That built its empire on emotional clarity.
So what happens if Ferrari's EV transition fails?
A failed EV lineup wouldn't just hurt sales. It would damage the perception of innovation, push loyal customers toward competitors, and, worst of all, split the brand between purists and progressives. In a world where Ferrari is neither fully traditional
nor fully future-proof,
the brand risks becoming something far worse
than outdated,
confused. And for a company whose identity once felt unshakable, that confusion could be the first domino in a far bigger collapse. For years, Ferrari owners lived with a sense of certainty that almost no other car brand could offer. Buy a Ferrari today, and it would still be worth a fortune tomorrow. Some even sold their cars for more than they originally paid. This wasn't luck. It was engineered.
But as Ferrari increased volume and expanded its lineup,
something began to shift, something Ferrari had avoided for decades.
their cars started depreciating, and this wasn't the normal luxury car depreciation curve. This was sharper, faster, and far more alarming. Before today's crisis, Ferrari had survived value crashes before. The F348, released in the late 80s, suffered one of the biggest drops in Ferrari history. Flawed early reviews and competition from Lamborghini drove prices downward for years.
Collectors still call it the Ferrari that humbled the brand?
Then there was the Ferrari Mondial, often labeled the worst Ferrari investment ever made. Overproduction and lukewarm performance meant resale values fell so hard that many owners swore off the brand entirely. But those crashes came from mistakes, from models that simply missed the mark.
This time the depreciation is happening.
Even to cars Ferrari believed were bulletproof. The Purosangue, Ferrari's big bet on new markets, is already losing value on the secondary market.
The SF90, a futuristic hybrid supercar, saw a $140,000 drop after just 185 miles.
Those numbers are not normal. Not for Ferrari. Not for a brand built on the promise of financial stability.
And the consequences go beyond the owners.
Dealers are panicking. For years, allocations were a gold mine. A guaranteed sellout, a guaranteed profit. But now, some dealers are watching allocations sit longer than expected. The ultra-rich, who used to beg for slots, are suddenly thinking about it. A phrase that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Even speculators, the flippers who treated Ferraris like investment assets, are stepping back. If the resale value is unpredictable, the incentive to buy early, hold for 6 months, and flip for profit disappears. And once speculators leave a brand, the artificial demand they create disappears with them. But the most dangerous shift isn't financial, it's psychological. Ferrari's value has always lived inside the mind of the buyer. It's not just the performance. It's not just the badge. It's the certainty that the car you buy today will still be a symbol of status tomorrow. If that certainty fades even slightly, the entire foundation begins to wobble. Because Ferrari is a luxury good. And luxury goods don't die when the product gets worse. They die when the perception weakens. For the first time in decades, Ferrari customers are hesitating, checking prices, running calculations, asking questions they never needed to ask before. And once doubt enters the luxury ecosystem, it spreads fast.
Ferrari built its empire on exclusivity,
on emotion, on the promise that owning a Ferrari placed you above the crowd. But if Ferraris start to behave like ordinary depreciating cars, then the myth, the thing people are really paying for,
begins to crack.
And once a myth cracks, it's almost impossible to repair.
Ferrari is now trapped in a quiet war.
Not against Lamborghini, McLaren, or Porsche, but against its own customers. And on the other side of that battlefield, stand the investors. For decades, Ferrari's customers were the guardians of the brand. They were the believers, the purists, the people willing to wait years
and obey the rules
because they trusted Ferrari to protect the value of what they bought. But investors, they want numbers, they want growth, they want volume, and Vigna delivered exactly that. Shipments up, revenue up, share price up,
but every step toward growth
brought Ferrari one step closer to something it never wanted to become, a volume luxury brand. History has shown what happens to high-prestige brands when they chase short-term growth over long-term identity. Porsche went heavy into EVs, pushing the Taycan as a mass-market premium car. Initial excitement created a spike in sales, but as volumes increased and exclusivity faded,
dealers were suddenly begging customers to take cars
that once had year-long waiting lists. The brand's aura dimmed, even if the profits rose. Bentley made the same mistake a decade earlier.
They doubled production to satisfy booming demand in China,
but the moment the market cooled, resale values crashed, waitlists disappeared, and Bentley was left with inventory it couldn't move. Lamborghini experienced this with the Gallardo, car that saved the company financially, but diluted its mystique. Thousands of Gallardos hit the road, and for the first time, a Lamborghini didn't feel rare. Now, Ferrari is following the same path, and the warning signs are everywhere. Customers feel the shift. They sense Ferrari prioritizing investors over loyalty. Waitlists are shorter in some regions. Models feel less exclusive. Depreciation is no longer a taboo word. For a brand built on emotion, this is catastrophic. Because luxury buyers don't need Ferraris. They want Ferraris. and want is fragile. The moment desire feels manufactured, instead of earned, it collapses. So what happens if Ferrari continues chasing volume? You get the scenario purists fear most. Ferrari becomes a mass luxury brand. The kind of brand where special editions aren't special anymore. Where auction prices fall. Where collectors pull back. Where the badge still means wealth, but no longer superiority. Dealers would stop having multi-year demand. Speculators would move on to Porsche GT cars or Koenigsegg. Values would slide. And the psychological prestige, the myth Ferrari built over 75 years, would evaporate. Because the moment Ferrari becomes accessible, it stops being Ferrari. Investors may cheer for growth today, but customers, the people who actually buy the cars, are the ones who determine Ferrari's fate. And if they walk away, no amount of revenue, stock performance, or quarterly profit can bring that magic back. Ferrari is standing at a crossroads: grow bigger or remain untouchable. It can't do both. Ferrari's future now hangs on a single question: grow bigger or stay legendary? Because once exclusivity collapses, so do it at Hail Merc. If you want to see another luxury icon struggling with the same mistakes, watch my deep dive on Porsche's EV crisis next.